district, which sometimes is the tougher part of the job. But if you're not doing things like this, you're not doing the most essential parts of your job. So that's why we're glad to put this together. And thanks to Indivisible for putting this together. What I want to do is give you a very quick update of what I get asked the most. And then let's just open it up, and Indivisible will have a process to, I think, come around with a mic for questions. So I think that's the way we're doing it today. So that's the mic. Oh, you're gonna have people come up front? Okay, so I guess people will come up front then when we do the question part. So where are we? First of all, I think I want to mention the holy grail for Donald Trump and Elon Musk, the thing that almost everything other than maybe the border directly feeds into, is this transfer of $4.5 trillion to a tax cut for the wealthiest. That's Elon Musk, that's Donald Trump, that's Jeff Bezos, that's Mark Zuckerberg, that's anyone who can afford to belong to Mar-a-Lago. My guess is it may not be for anyone in this room, and if it is, congratulations. But I'm guessing it's probably not. And the way they did it last time Trump was president is they just put it all in the debt, right? So they added the most of any president in history to the debt in doing the tax cuts. If they do the tax cuts again, the numbers we're hearing at the end of the next 10 years, 83% of all the money on the tax cuts will have gone to the top 1%. That's the tax cuts they have. Just the extension, the continuation of what they already have, and they're talking about a few other things that could happen. So that's why it's so important. That's their holy grail. That's what they want to get to. This time, what's unique is they've decided to do it in a couple of ways. They're not just putting it on the debt, because I think there's some Republicans that don't want to do that. I think Elon Musk doesn't want to do that. Somehow Elon Musk's opinion matters. I guess when you put $277 million into a presidential race, being the biggest donor in American history, you have some influence. But they in the reconciliation bill that they're trying to pass, and I'm going to explain all this in a second, but trust me, there's a few reasons why I'm doing it in the steps. They passed a budget bill a couple of weeks ago that set up the instructions for a reconciliation bill. A reconciliation bill is a fancy way to get around the 60-vote filibuster rules in the Senate. So you need a simple majority to pass the tax cuts. All right, so you can only do it once a fiscal year. So they can do it once between now and September 30th, and they could do it again on October 1st if they wanted. But once a fiscal year, they can do that process of reconciliation to get around the 60-vote rule. What they passed a few weeks ago were the instructions, the targets to find the money. And in that, there was $1.5 trillion of cuts. Now, they didn't do that last time, but this time they were proposing that. To make it easy, and we can talk more in depth if you have a question on this, the main areas they're looking at cutting, there was an $880 billion suggested cut to the Energy and Commerce Committee. The jurisdiction of the Energy and Commerce Committee for total budget is all of Medicaid, all of Medicare, and about $581 billion of everything else that they do. So all the Republicans are saying, look, it does not say Medicaid in the bill. We're not cutting Medicaid. That's also called horse manure. I'm being polite because we're streaming. I'd be polite to you all too. But I'm just telling you that the reality is that $581 million, if you're cutting $880 billion, you're $299 billion. You have to either cut Medicaid or Medicare by their own instructions. So if they say they're not cutting Medicaid, then it's fair to say they're cutting Medicare, because that's the only two options that are left by what they're cutting. They're cutting $230 billion to agriculture, but the predominant amount of money that's going to be cut is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This is our food assistance program. That's the #1 program that keeps kids out of poverty in America. And it's equivalent to, just so you understand, $6.20 a day in food assistance. I mean, it's not a lot of money. My freshman term, when John Boehner was looking at cutting Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, some of us lived on SNAP for a day, and some of us were stupid like me and lived on it for a week. And that meant I had $31.50 that week to spend on food. So we went to the grocery store. I bought a bag of oranges. That was 15 of my budget. I had ramen noodles, I had peanut butter, I had a bad attitude all week, I was told by my office, because it's next to impossible to be able to live off of that. It's not like someone's getting wealthy off of this. That's the likely thing that'll be cut the most out of the agriculture cuts. The third area, and there's four that are the biggies, but there's more. The third big area is education. The cuts to education are 45% of the federal funding on education. So very likely that's Pell Grants. Anyone here ever receive a Pell Grant when they went to college? Or your kids received a Pell Grant? I received a Pell Grant when I got to college. That was part of how I was able to fund it. I grew up in a lower middle class family. That's very likely to be cut. Also, Title I funds, which are for lower income K-12 schools, and IDEA funds, which are for special ed, are also likely to be cut, because that's the only way you can cut 45% of the education's budget. But here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Not only are you going to lose services, which means fewer teachers and bigger class sizes, but you're also likely to have some of that go onto your property taxes, because it's largely education is paid at the local level. So you're going to lose services and you're going to pay more for it so that Donald Trump and Elon Musk can get a tax cut at the end of the day. So that's the education cuts. And the fourth area that's just, I'm going to mention now, but again, there's many other things, is the assistance we provide for the Affordable Care Act. That's how it is affordable, right? Because we're providing some assistance on that. They want to go after that. And that will directly go after people's ability to have health care. So that's the big four that they're looking at, that $1.5 trillion. But also, that doesn't cover the $4.5 trillion, right? So they're going to have some funny money, in my opinion, this is my opinion, with tariffs. I think part of the tariff fight, as chaotic and strange as it all is, the way Donald Trump is doing it, I think it's to have funny money, to have revenue to pay for the cuts. And if it doesn't get realized, it just goes onto the national debt. But this is a way to say they're not putting it onto the debt. So I think, my opinion, that's part of why they talk about that. So that's the reconciliation bill and the process to get the tax cuts. The last thing I think I'm going to say, because I'd rather just open it up right away to make sure we're addressing your questions, is my other concern around Social Security. Social Security is not part of the reconciliation bill, to be clear. They have cut like 7,000 employees, I think it is, at Social Security, which is going to make it harder to get the services that you've paid for all your life out of your paycheck into Social Security. But it's not part of that bill. However, they've cut 7,000 or multiple thousands of people who work at Social Security. Elon Musk has called it a Ponzi scheme. We know how much power he has right now. And Donald Trump took an unusually large amount of real estate in his State of the Union speech to talk about Social Security. How many of you watch the State of the Union speech just to see? Oh, good. Oh, so many of you. Thank you. You didn't see it. I sat through as much as I could before I finally walked out because it was so awful. But he took a long time to continue a lie that Doge put out there about the fact that people over 100, all these people are on the Social Security papers and are getting payments up to being 360 years old. So two different Inspector General reports said, that's BS. That's not true. Because what is true is we don't keep track of records of deaths in Social Security. That's what local government kind of does through keeping track of that. But there could be people on paper who aren't around, but they're not getting checks. And automatically, according to a law going back to 2015, at $115 years old, no more checks are sent out. So everything he said was a lie, but he said it over a lot of time in that speech. So, I wasn't born, yesterday. I kind of get that there's a plan to go after Social Security and all of this. And again, Elon Musk keeps saying that's the big place you get money is by going after entitlements. I hate that term because I just say it's our damn money, right? We paid into it, right? It's our money that us and our employers have paid into the fund. But watch out for that. So we're worried about Social Security. We're worried about Medicare and Medicaid, which more aptly is healthcare and long-term care for people. And just for the Wisconsin numbers on Medicaid, 1 out of 3 kids gets their health insurance from Medicaid. 45% of adults with disabilities living independently get support through Medicaid. 55% of seniors in nursing homes, including my mom in her final years, get support from Medicaid, right? So it's 1.3 million people who get support from that. And I promise, last thing I'm going to say, just real quick on DOGE, because I know the questions will come up. A lot of this, we're not sure how legal any of this is. We're not sure really what his title is. All I can tell you is in our neighboring district, Derek Van Orden, who represents the 3rd Congressional District, if you may not know, but he's the guy who is the insurrectionist who attended and was on the Capitol grounds on January 6th, who got elected to Congress. That's kind of like me giving haircut advice. I don't think I'm the best person to be doing it, but he is in Congress. And, he said recently that it's not DOGE firing all these people, it's the agencies. But if you think someone was fired improperly, contact DOGE. Again, none of this makes sense. But we took him to his challenge. So we went to the DOGE website and there's no phone number. We thought, okay, we'll send an email. There's no email. So then we contacted all of our liaison contacts and they had nothing. So then we contacted the White House and they said, can you call back in 10 minutes? So we called back in 10 minutes and they had no contacts for us. So if I, as a member of Congress, as your representative, can't get a phone number or an email for someone at DOGE, how is someone who thinks they got fired improperly out of the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that have been fired ever going to access that? So we think DOGE is running, much of what they're doing is illegal. The power of the purse is Congress's by Article 1 of the Constitution. It's congressional authority. Republicans are just giving that up right now. And that's why there's lawsuits around that. There literally are hundreds of lawsuits. So with that, let me just take questions because I just want to give you that for a base. At least it tells you the big thing is watch out for that tax hike or cut. I'm sorry. That's what is their holy grail. They want that money for Elon Musk and Donald Trump, and they're going to take away a lot from us to get that. And then secondly, we got a whole lot of other things we're just trying to stop them from. And luckily, there's a lot of litigation that's probably going to be the most successful way of stopping it. So, Erin, however you want to do questions,
We were thinking if people can queue up maybe like 3 at a time over there, so everybody can hear the question at that microphone and then you can answer using this one.
All right, great. So I guess they're asking people to go up to the microphone on the stand right here. And we'll do like 3 people at a time. Somebody, unless you want to stand a little longer behind, that's fine. We just don't want to make people stand too long. And go ahead and please start.
Thanks, Mark. My name's Karen. I'm one of 3 Karens so far that I've seen in the room. So we're going to form a Karen committee and ask to see our managers.
Great. Nice. All right.
But in the meantime, I mean, you're talking about lawsuits, and right now they have violated judge's order to stay a plane full of deportees to El Salvador. Those planes were in the air. They were supposed to turn around. They didn't. Another plane took off and landed, and those people have been illegally deported. When they start ignoring court orders out of these lawsuits, where do we stand?
Yeah, so we are living through all of this right now together, right? Most of this has not been done before, so we're figuring out what's happening. The good news is on much of the litigation, even Trump-appointed judges are voting against him because they recognize it's clearly against the law or the Constitution what they're doing. The question is this very step we're at right now. When they start to defy that, what is the remedy that's going to be out there? And I think that's what we're figuring out right now, honestly. And it's difficult because they're flooding the zone, right? There's so much happening. Some of that's intentional, and some of that is, remember when Donald Trump in the debate against Harris, when they asked him about a healthcare plan, he said he didn't have a plan, he had a concept of a plan. A lot of this is a concept of a plan, right? It's not as easy and clear as, like he knows what he's doing. So some of this is just a little more difficult to kind of figure out. But that is the very step that we're now, as these are starting to happen, figure out how we're able to have any recourse on that.
And my follow-up question to that would be, what can we do to support you in all of that?
So here's the advice I give right now. There's, 3 things I'm going to say, because I'm on the official side, so I can't say vote for or vote against anyone, right? I am going to recognize, though, there is an election on April 1st. And I do believe Elon Musk has spent about $10 million for a candidate. And if people are unhappy with Elon Musk, there probably are vehicles through the April election. Can I say this any more convoluted? That you could be expressing your voice. So that's one thing on April 1st. 2 and 3 really are, it's litigation and communication. There's litigation trackers. If you Google it, because I forget the name of it right now, but there's a litigation tracker. It's an app even. There's multiple apps where you can see the hundreds of lawsuits that are out there and what the subject and who's bringing that lawsuit on. If certain areas are especially important to you, and it may even be Doge as big as just Doge in general, it might be specific on employees at a certain division, but there's lawsuits. Support the groups that are doing the litigation, because that's where we're going to have our best victories, is through litigation. And then communication. I don't think it's misinformation that's out there. I think it's disinformation that's being put out there. Clearly Doge is unbelievably chaotic. And if we had a conversation about that, it's just like, there will be books written about Doge and what a cluster thing it is, right? So, helping get the disinformation combat. So like when we talk about, they say, no, we're not cutting Medicaid, but you're saying, yes, because you cut everything in their jurisdiction, you still have $300 billion you have to cut, then it has to be Medicare or Medicaid. And there's a great chart that we've put out on our social media, and we'll put up again. But get that out there, and I didn't create it, New York Times did, to be fair, but it's a great chart because it really shows the big lie they're putting out there. We just have to get the information out there. My fear is they want to do this tax bill as early as April. One of the things I just heard, and I have to get confirmation, it could be more like September now because the CR, which would be good. The more time we have to fight this, is the better. But if they're going to do it as quick as that, we just have to really do everything we can right now to make people informed, because otherwise they won't feel the pain until after it's happened, and then you have these tax cuts in place for the next decade. So, you all are doing a great job of contacting me, by the way. I've got record days and record weeks of contacts, which is good because we all keep track of this, and it's helpful for me to know. The very first day we broke the record, over half of the calls were anti-Elon Musk, what he's doing, and just about half the calls were on Medicaid specifically. So that helps me to know what you're most worried about and what you're looking at and how it might affect you or your family or a neighbor personally, and then we can get some of the stories to talk about. So litigation and communication, I gave you a really long answer. I promise I'll do them shorter because people are standing in line. Thank you.
So I was at your town hall at the Labor Temple in January.
Okay.
And one of the things that you said is that the Democratic Party doesn't have a leader. And I think you may have literally been talking about the vacancy in the DNC chair at the time. But I think the events of the last 72 hours have shown us that the Democratic Party does not have a leader, at least in the sense of somebody, very literally in the sense of somebody who can lay out a strategy and then see that that strategy actually goes through. So given that that's the case, how is that going to change, and what are you doing to see that it changes?
Yeah, so let me answer it in a non-political way, because this is the official side. But I think what I was addressing at that time was just the factual side. There's no president, there's no vice president, there's no one single head. And at that time, we didn't have the DNC election yet, right? Now we've had that. So at least there's a head of the DNC, but that is still someone who's not seen as the party leader. At least I don't think most people look at that. So that's part of the difficulty, right? You have governors, you have senators, and then the vote we just had, just so you understand, I mean, let me talk about that a second, because I think it helps in the context of this. The House was very clear. Every single Democrat but one, so it's like 214 of us or something, but we had a few absences, so it might have been slightly smaller, voted against the CR because the continuing resolution, sorry to say things like CR, the continuing resolution was going to continue funding, flat funding through September 30th. The problem with that, among many things, but first of all, it did cut a number of programs, so it wasn't really a continuing resolution. It increased funding for the Pentagon and for ICE. But the real, I think, issue was if you don't have an omnibus budget bill passed, which is what we usually pass, or the 12 budget bills done, which we don't usually do, but that's the how a bill becomes a law, cartoon version of what's supposed to happen. You have congressional direction on spending because we're Article 1 Constitution saying this is what Congress says you have to spend the money on. It helps us when they go against us, and the Republicans aren't standing up to the president when they're going against our congressional Article 1 authority on spending. So that was our contention, that this may allow them to argue they can keep cutting funds more. The counter argument, and the problem is we have bad choices and worse choices because elections have consequences. There's no really good choices that are practically going to happen in many areas. So with the other kind of side of the coin, I guess you'd say, was that if you shut down government, and they may have very likely done that because they want to prove that people won't really feel the difference, because by shutdown, you have essential employees and non-essential. So things might slow down, but some essential things, people still would hopefully get their Social Security checks and things like that, so they may not feel it the same way. But after 30 days, if someone has been furloughed and they're non-essential, which is the majority of people they would be deciding who's essential and non-essential. The White House would be deciding this, OPM, the Office of Personnel and Management, that they could be fired easier. Because we're arguing a lot of these firings are illegal, but this, you could argue then that would actually make them legal and tougher to turn back. So it's not like someone did something 100% wrong. There were different opinions on the way forward, but almost every Democratic senator and certainly every Democrat in the House but one said the better way was to fight the CR. And if nothing else, to show we're having the fight, right? That we are not going to just let things happen. But what will continue to happen is there still isn't a leader in the Democratic Party. There's not a single person that is the spokesperson. So it is a little bit more chaotic than I wish it was. So my strategy, to be honest, is I'm just focusing on making it as hard as possible for the Republicans to pass the cuts, the $1.5 trillion of cuts as they're moving forward. And so I've kind of started this going into other people's districts, which is, by normal or polite society improper, but I don't give a damn. Yes, thank you. So we've now got more members doing this, and now you've got Tim Walz traveling around, and you've got AOC and Rokana and Bonnie Watson Coleman and Maxwell Frost and other people. I shouldn't start saying names, I'm getting in trouble, but we're starting to do this more because I think this is the pressure. If they really were proud of what they're doing, wouldn't you want to talk about it? Wouldn't you want to get on the rooftop and scream about it? Instead, they're hiding in their mom's basement, right? So this is the pressure that I'm trying to use right now, but it's going to continue to be difficult because if the easiest way to recognize the heads are Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, and they just had a disagreement on this, it certainly adds to confusion. That's a long answer again. I keep telling you I'm going to quit doing long answers. I'm really going to try to do them shorter. Sorry, but thank you.
So I have two questions. One question, what accounts for the erosion of working class support for the Democratic Party in place of solidarity cast along class lines? Now it's cast along lines of more and more discreetly identified groups. So my question to you is, and it's very frustrating because I see this, the way the Democrat is, what can the Democratic Party do to reinvigorate working class support for bread and butter issues?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So again, I'm going to answer it in the official capacity, but I think this one's pretty easy to answer either way, as far as there's not a conflict. Well, first of all, what we saw was in 12 or 14 countries that are similar to us around the world, people in charge got kicked out of office because of global inflation that continued coming out of COVID, right? Mainly groceries, energy, and housing costs. And we actually were doing better than many other countries, but people still felt it. And when you look at the exit polls, 50% of the people said the economy was the reason they voted the way they did. 20-some% said the border, and there were 3 other ones that were much less in percent. But it was clearly that was a big factor. I would argue that we all need to channel our inner FDR a little better and focus on those core economic issues, raising minimum wage, healthcare for everyone. Go down the list of things that we need to we've always done, but we kind of didn't talk about in the same way. And I think there was a mistake in not responding to some of the attacks that were so crazy they put out there. But by not responding, we didn't, then suddenly the Democrats were talking about issue X or Y when we never talked about it once, but it was the Republicans putting ads out there. And I think we didn't handle that part well. The good news is one thing that seems to unify Democrats right now is that we need to use more non-traditional media to get the information out. So 45% of undecided voters didn't get their information from mainstream media. So all the ads that all the consultants who have all the big houses in Virginia, those didn't do the job. But we need to use things like podcasts and other social media. So I just started a podcast. How many of you know I started a podcast, first of all? Okay, we just started it, but it's called With Liberty and Justice for Some. And what we're doing every week, we're taking on some of the bigger issues and doing a deep dive, about a 35-minute interview with Jamie Raskin, right? We did one on him. We did one with a guy who used to be an insurance executive who blew the whistle on insurance companies on what a scam Medicare Advantage is. And he used to work for Cigna, and he was our very first episode. We're going to do one this week. We're taping. I'm not sure when it's going to come in yet, to talk specifically about Gaza and talk with ANERA, one of the main groups that does work on the ground. So we're just taking on some of these bigger issues and doing a deep dive on it. But that's just one little part we're doing. But we are trying to use social media more. So I'm talking to people that sometimes I'm surprised they have an audience, but they have an audience. I'll talk to them. So we're trying to get things out that way. That's one good thing, at least, that people understand we need to do. Now we're just trying to get everyone to understand it's kind of that inner FDR, the core values of the Democratic Party that need to be talked about.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. That's a little high for you there, sorry.
Hi, I'm short. My name
So
is
much.
Michelle Bosher. I have about 1 million questions, Mark.
Let's do one just out of courtesy, and I'll promise, I really am going to try to be shorter. It's hard.
I understand.
some of these.
I think we all have 1 million questions, really. So what I wanted to ask you was, there's so much talk from the administration about annexing Canada. Certainly the tariffs against Canada and Mexico and now the EU are meant to drive away our allies and to create more economic chaos throughout the world. And there's the Greenland thing, there's the Panama thing, and in several spots I've read about people extrapolating that perhaps this is related to the idea that the world is going to be carved into 3 spheres of influence. Russia gets all of Europe, China gets all of Asia, the US gets North and South America. I'm not even going to ask you about that, but in light of that, what are your thoughts about the step up of increasing the hostilities with other countries? I was just hearing on the radio driving in about North and South Korea being in the crosshairs for some reason or other. And this belligerence, this drive towards war, this drive towards not just conflict, but something bigger than that. I'm wondering if you could speak to your sense of why that is.
So I think you're asking me a 30,000-foot kind of foreign policy question, right, with Trump and what he's up to, maybe? Is that the fair way of, okay. So I do think that, again, this concept of a plan is the way Donald Trump operates. And the other thing I really do believe is that the last time he was president, 90% of what he said never happened, right? He says a lot of things and a lot of dumb things, but the goal is to figure out what he's really trying to do. I think this time it's more like 75% won't happen, but 25% still will. And that's what we've got to really keep our eye. So every time he puts a shiny object in front of us, I try not to go for that lure, because like I know right now, the holy grail for them is the tax cut, right? And we got to keep laser focused on what he's trying to do by stealing money and these programs to do that. having said that, I think the Canada stuff, the Greenland stuff, maybe the Panama, although I think there it's more about China is the argument he's making there, are things that he's saying that I just don't think he even has support among Republicans. On Ukraine was a good classic example. During the State of the Union speech, Republicans stood up for everything, but then the next day or two, you heard Republicans say, well, I don't agree with him on, and that was one where he had less support, but you already saw him soften his language that evening than usual. So, he is breaking the way that we've done things traditionally at the UN when we're voting with Russia and Belarus and 2 or 3 other countries against the rest of the world. Clearly, it's hurting our position. And the tariff stuff, I think, clearly hurts our position because it's chaotic. I mean, I am good with, if you want to do steel tariffs because they're dumping cheap steel in the United States, it is a good thing to do tariffs on steel because you're supporting the U.S. steel workers in doing so. But when you do blanket tariffs on everything, it's chaos, right? It's not strategic. It's just a tax on all of us to pay for those things. And I don't really think he's got a broader strategy going for it. That's why I couldn't tell you right now where we even are on tariffs, because he's done some and then partial ones and he takes them back and then he puts them back out there, and it's really hard to keep up with. But it's having an impact. And then when you put people like Tulsi Gabbard in charge of the CIA, who has no real practical experience, and the world's not going to trust her, that's not helpful. And when you put someone in charge of defense who was a Fox talking head, that isn't going to help. So it's
A DUI hire.
DUI. I haven't heard that one. I like that. I might save that for the political town halls, though. But so I've given you again a long answer, but the problem is, it's certainly going to hurt our place. I think less countries are going to trust us the way we've always been trusted. And when we start cutting things like USAID, that's only, by the way, 1% of our federal budget is the assistance that we do around the world that's done for the right thing to show where our values really are. That has a lot of negative ramifications. China does a lot of this. They don't do it as well. A lot of time they do it as loans and stuff, but we're not going to do anything. I mean, the food that we send, 99.9% of the food that we send overseas, it comes from places like the 2nd District in Wisconsin, right? It's grown here and then it goes overseas, and we're not, keeping that up there. So I'm really worried too about what it means across the world. I think a lot of people are going to be looking at the next year's elections, hoping there's some changes that might give them some confidence, but it's going to be a little tough road in the meantime.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
My name is John Zolanik. I'm an elder law attorney here in town, so I work with Medicare and Medicaid regularly.
Yeah.
And people don't understand it. Medicaid is paid for by a payroll tax. You earn income, you pay the Medicare tax. Social Security, separate tax, not paid on capital gains, not paid on loans, the way the billionaires make their money. All of us are concerned about mom and grandma and people who might be uninsured. But I grew up in Chippewa Falls, where the hospital closed with 6 weeks' notice.
Yep.
Another one in Eau Claire, and 50 clinics. They couldn't make it on the reimbursements for Medicare and Medicaid and traditional insurance, so they closed. So now we're talking about cutting that. My question is, seeming that Congress is not having any input here, are you hearing from the other stakeholders, the people who run hospitals, the people who run nursing homes and clinics and that kind of thing? Because I don't hear anything from them.
Yeah, we are, but it's much quieter because they know there's retribution from Trump for speaking out. But, I had Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce in my office who, lean more conservative in general. And they started bringing up different issues they had with Donald Trump. And I said, elections have consequences, don't they? And, not gloating, although I was a little bit, but they're saying it, but not in the way they need to. And I'll be honest, even when we try to get people sometimes to speak out, to join us, they're afraid of retribution. I mean, we had a difficulty when we had a press conference early on in the administration, we were trying to get someone in, I'm just going to say one sector that was being impacted, and we couldn't find someone to join us for a press conference because they were afraid of the retribution. Now, since then, I think people are starting to speak out more. We're certainly getting personal stories around Medicaid, Medicare. That's good, right? We have those. That's why Republicans are afraid of that and they don't want to talk to their constituents. But many of these other areas, it is tougher. And, your example on the hospitals, add that to the fact that, Elizabeth Warren and I have a bill to go after private equity buying hospitals because, you can make money in healthcare if you don't provide overall healthcare. If you just focus in a couple areas, it's very profitable and you can piece it out. But that's not what you're supposed to do with healthcare, right? And that's why those hospitals, I'm reading a book right now by an ER nurse down in New Mexico in a system and showing the whole example over history, what private equity did. It's really pretty ugly. So people are starting to talk out a little more. We obviously need more of that, especially Republicans need to speak out because that's why we put the pressure on Republican representatives in Wisconsin. We have 6 of them. We're a gerrymandered state, right? Out of 8 members of the House, 6 are Republican. We're clearly purple. It should be 4 and 4 by population. But we need 3 people starting in April when the appointees that Trump made get the special elections are done. They only have a 3-seat margin. 3 nationally. We don't need all 3 from Wisconsin. But if we give them enough that in closed caucus even, and I'm okay with this because we get a lot of reports what happens. If they say, I've gotten so many calls on Medicaid in my district that we just can't do this in this way, that helps. So sometimes I said there's bad and worse decisions. If they're going to get the tax bill done, I guarantee it, by reconciliation, they have the votes to do it. No Democrat will vote for it. I guarantee that. But they're going to pass it. But I'd rather they not devastate all those programs to do it. So our job right now is to highlight that and make it so hard for them to do those cuts that they'll have a bunch of fake revenue in tariffs and whatever else to say they paid for it. But at least we won't take away people's health care, their food for hungry kids and all the rest.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being here today, and for answering some of our questions. You mentioned earlier that your current goal is to make it as hard as possible for the Republicans to pass through their agenda, specifically when it comes to all of these financial cuts. I feel like when it comes to the court of public opinion, there's not enough being done. And what I mean by that is you mentioned resistance to how the Republicans pushing through their agenda, but it doesn't feel like there's any counteraction. You recently just mentioned that you have a bill with Elizabeth Warren. So I'm curious, despite being in the minority in Congress, what policies, legislations, or bills are you or your colleagues pushing through despite the fate of it, even if it goes down because you're in the minority? Because a track record when it comes to the next most important election of our lives and the next most important election of our lives that we can point back to Trump voters and middle swayed voters that are now thinking, maybe I messed up. What is the alternative? What positions are you pushing forward?
So, I mean, people are still introducing the bills that I think we always do. So there'll be a Medicare for All bill that I'm a sponsor of that's going to be reintroduced. There'll be bills to raise the minimum wage at the federal level that'll be introduced. The bills to fix the election system so that, anywhere you are in the country, that you're able to vote without having people put state laws to block. So, I mean, all the normal stuff is still going to happen and we're going to be able to talk about. And then some things that to try to highlight issues. So I had one, and I'm going to say the bill's wrong. I don't know if Dane can help me and look it up while I'm forgetting my few words on this. We have a bill called the Elon Musk Act, which stands for Eliminate the Looting of Our Nation by Mitigating Something Kleptocracy. It's a lot of words, but it's the Elon Musk Act, and what it's about is while Elon Musk is doing what he's doing right now, I, as a member of Congress, can't have a federal contract, right? Because it would be crazy. I could steer money towards myself. If you're a federal employee, you can't have a federal contract in any area you have authority because you could sway money to yourself. Elon Musk has over $3 billion, $8 million a day is going to Elon Musk through contracts that we know of. Plus, he has undisclosed ones at Starlink. So the Elon Musk Act. Okay, I'll read it now. All right, so it's the Eliminate Looting of Our Nation by Mitigating Unethical State Kleptocracy. Woo! Woo! I got a drink after that. that is saying he can't have contracts if he's going to be in this position because it's unethical. And we're trying to point out the corruption of what's going on. So I think you're still going to see the bills that we can point to and say, look, if we're in the majority, this is what we're fighting for. But I also think, because legislation is not going to pass, that I probably care about value-wise with this current Congress, but we can introduce things to help make points. And I think if people see there's an Elon Musk Act and you find out that this guy's making $8 million a day, while the average person on Social Security, it's, I think, $68 a day or something like that. It's a good contrast to show what they're doing.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Hello,
Hi
thank
there.
you also for coming today. I appreciate it. And I know it's harder. You're in an official capacity. I have questions for you. They're probably not great for that, but.
If you could
I'll
try
do
to
my
hit the
best.
official capacity ones would be better. Thank you.
So, all right. I do want to say one thing. The one thing that I don't hear enough about, and I would love to know if you hear, what are Republicans saying? They must acknowledge that if grandma's kicked out of a nursing home because of cuts to Medicaid, where does grandma go? What happens to grandma? What's the cost? Are there at least conversations? Do you feel that there's recognition that there will be consequences to this?
So I think Republicans are so afraid of Donald Trump that they're not thinking at all as they vote on this stuff. I had a Republican, as I walked to vote one day, tell me, we're not even getting reports from what DOJ is doing. Well, then why are you letting them do it, right? I mean, it's a pretty simple question, but they're being told that you can do all of these cuts to Medicaid by just, making people work. Well, it's been proven that it doesn't work. That's not going to save very much money at all. But they're being told certain things, and it won't affect grandma in the nursing home, and it won't affect that kid who's getting Medicaid. That's what they're being told. But they're also not asking a lot of questions about what these cuts are either, and that's on them. So, every 2 years, you have the ability to hire us or fire us, and we just need people in those districts to be loud and heard.
I hope you and others keep asking them so we can get it on their record, so we can see the blank stare.
Yeah, that's why I've been actually almost like baiting the member from the 3rd district to do town halls. I've offered every Wisconsin Republican, if they want to have a town hall, to invite me, and I'll come and let's debate this. If they're so proud of it, then you want to talk about it, right? And I'll come and just say my, I guess, ignorant part, but let them come and, brag. They won't. They're not doing town halls. And if they do a telephone town hall, you'll probably notice we don't do those. I think I've done 2, maybe 3 in 12 years. And COVID, we did it because we couldn't do this. But, you spend, first of all, $8,000 or $10,000 of your money to do those town halls. And then the questions are given to me by staff. You don't actually get a chance to ask them on the telephone. You're just listening. So you could say, are you going to kick my grandmother out of the nursing home because of Medicaid? And they can say, oh, we have a question that says, thank you so much for all you've done on dairy policy, right? So those are not town halls. This format is an open public town hall, and that's what we need them to do.
Well, I did have it. That wasn't really my question. It was a follow-up to another one, so I'm
All right,
I-
can you do
slightly.
22nd question? I'll give a real quick answer. This
Through
one.
this, but there must be, I
Okay.
imagine that you and your colleagues have discussed the legal options if this administration who's been asked to come into court is found in contempt.
Yeah, so there,
Do we have U.S. Marshals? What do we have?
Yeah.
Who are they going after?
Yeah.
Is it Elon Trump? Is it Trump? Is it,
yeah. So
the
that
other-
question was asked, I'm just going to say real short. We do have a working group led by Jamie Raskin, who, by the way, I think many of you may know Jamie because he's got Wisconsin connections. He's a constitutional law professor. He gets this more than probably anyone in Congress. So he and others, other lawyers in our caucus are kind of taking the lead on that. But this is part of what we're living through and coming up with answers for right now.
So you can't disclose exactly what potential options.
I think we're
see.
still trying to figure out what all
Okay.
options are legal, honestly. I'd be glad to share it if I knew them.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
that very much.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Like everybody else, thank you so much for being here. My name's Stephanie. I am hoping to ask you about 2 pieces of legislation specifically. One is the SAVE Act, and if you think, how full steam ahead is that going, and how worried and how much do we need to start agitating about that particular bill? If we could do that one first, and then I'll ask you the second one.
Yeah, so I'll do real quick, because the best I know, they were going to schedule it and then they pulled it.
Okay.
So that means they're having difficulties in their caucus. But that's not my final answer.
Yeah.
But for right now, that's the answer.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the other thing, we are seeing them trying to dismantle the Department of Education by just firing all the staff. And then there's this kind of promise from the Secretary of Education that they're going to follow up with proposals, I would presume, to Congress to officially shut it.
Yeah.
And it seems like they're doing that with other agencies as well. And I'm wondering if you have heard anything, like would Congress be receptive to that? Have you heard any like whispers about what might happen with the Department of Education specifically?
Yeah, so this week they just did all the firings, right? So this is pretty fresh, still kind of looking at it, but they claim it's correct by law. It has to be Congress that would take it apart. They can't, like USAID, they just eliminated, even though that was also designated by Congress. So, you know, what they're doing is going to be challenged over and over. But they would have to find every single Republican to support that. Because again, I don't think there's Democrats who would support that. So given that, it goes back to that issue. If we find 3 people who won't support it, they can't pass it on the floor. So I think it's going to be hard to find a unanimous, you know, body on their side to say completely get rid of the Department of Education.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So this is supposed to end in 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 folks. Why don't we do 2 questions at a time if we could? And then I'm going to try to answer them just a little quicker because I do want to make sure we're keeping it to the time that they're doing. So, sir, if you could, why don't you just come on up there too, and we'll have her ask a question, then you, and then I'll give an answer to both. That's fine. I'm just trying to save a little time. And if you get closer to the mic, that will work for that. Thank you. So, yes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about, so you're talking about Democratic leadership and sort of not having that leader who can speak on behalf of the Democratic Party, as well as the alternative media, attempting to use more social media and that sort of thing. And I just wanted to find out, is there any movement toward more consolidation? There are a lot of folks like you are putting out the podcasts and AOC and others that are doing a really great job on social media. But has there been any discussion of sort of consolidating that into like Indivisible national organizations doing a great job with a weekly, hey, here's all the shit that went down this week and what you should be focusing attention on, how you should be addressing it. So has there been any discussion about sort of consolidating those?
Great. Thank you. And sir?
I'm a trans male. My name is Silas. And I'm wondering what the Democrats, what your office is doing to counteract all the deluge of hatred and the bills against us, trying to erase us. I'd like to know what's happening in that regard.
Great, thank you. So the first one, just quickly, we have a Democratic DPCC, Democratic Policy Communications Committee. I'm guessing I might be off on one of the words, that does kind of aggregate information to us. And they're the ones trying to get us to do things like podcasts and stuff. We were just first out of the gate because I wanted to do one for a while, and we were a little bit more ready for that. So yes, there is something to try to get us all doing more of that. A quick thing on Indivisible nationally, if you could repeat this message to them. I had this message with Leah directly at the national. We need a national women's march, level march, like we had 200 cities across the country. When we had 20,000 people at the Capitol, we need that sooner than later. I know Move On is doing a National Day of Action on April 5th. So is Indivisible on that day? Okay. It's about 3 months later than I would have liked it, but good. Let's just make sure they have it, please. So thank you. On your question, sir, so I chaired the Equality Caucus last session, one of the co-chairs still right now. This is one of the areas that's the toughest because what they're doing is I think they threw spaghetti against the wall to see where they could find they love to govern by fear, right? They want you to be afraid of someone rather than through, you know, goodwill. That's how they motivate people. And somehow they found that people don't think, at least they know someone who's trans, right? We know this happened to the gay and lesbian, you know, being myself, that, you know, when people didn't think they knew someone, it was tougher once people got to know their neighbor, their coworker, their family member. Public perception changed. Right now, they're in this really ugly period of what they're doing around the issues around trans. And the good news, at least on the House side, I really don't know where the Senate votes have been on this, but I think we held recently on a vote, everyone but 1 or 2 members given we're losing 60 people on some other issues that they're bringing up, that's pretty solid because we understand human rights and human dignity, and that's important. And we're trying to fight back. But I actually talked to the speaker himself about when Sarah McBride got elected, who is trans from Delaware. They said she couldn't use their women's restrooms. And of course, people like Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene and some of the other dull crayons in the box of people I serve with, this was a really big issue to them. He said that, she could use his bathroom, but no, it's public policy, right? There's other people who come into the building. It's not about one person. So it's tough because right now, the reality, and I share this only because I think this is important for perspective on this, there are more billionaires, 13 in Trump's orbit in the cabinet and appointees, than there are trans athletes in the NCAA, right? For all the rhetoric that's out there, for all the money they spend on TV. The Republican governor of Utah vetoed a bill that the Republican legislative majority passed. And in his veto message, he said there are 75,000 kids in K-12 schools in organized public sports, and 3 are trans and 1 is a trans girl. And he also said, by the way, the suicidality rate of teens who are trans is up to 80% because of bullying by people like those Republican legislators. So there are some glimmers of hope. But right now, in general, it's knuckle dragging by most of the Republicans on this issue. But I'm proud to say, at least in our party, we haven't seen slippage. And that was one of the things people tried to say at election time. And it wasn't one of the top 5 issues that people said after they voted, why they voted. And fortunately, most Democrats get it. So I'm optimistic, but understand this is a really shitty period of time for you to be going through right now, and everyone to be going through. It's about human rights and human dignity. So, all right. So let's do, it's hard for me to remember the questions. I'm gonna go back to one by one. I'm sorry. So go ahead, if you could quickly, and I'll try to go quicker.
Okay, so given that we have Kennedy as the head of the Department of Health, and then we have a cut to U.S. aid that also helps with keeping down disease from abroad, what stopgaps or traction do we have to counter the lunacy, basically?
I mean, it's going to be tough. Like, they fired everyone who studies bird flu at a time we're paying, these high prices on eggs because of bird flu. They're not thinking through a lot of this. And, RFK is going to be very complex because I don't quite understand all his thought. I actually agree with him on we should do more things for healthier foods, right? And we should go after some of the toxins that are used as additives to food and all that. But then he gets into the world of vaccines and some other areas that's also risky. And most recently on measles, something I never thought would be controversial, he's kind of made controversial. At least the CDC appointment got pulled last week. I don't know if you saw that, the person that was supposed to lead the Center for Disease Control. So that was at least a positive movement, but we're also losing research dollars with the NIH right now. And, in some cases, I don't know if anyone here ever worked for or works for the university and doing any research, but on fetal tissue, for example, if you even miss a day or two of what you're doing, you might have lost 2 years of research. And since they're freezing funds and then unfreezing them, and it's so chaotic, it's really difficult. So I think in general, there's no question the scientific community gets this and is speaking out. I think some of the best rallies we've seen so far locally have been on the science-based side of the attacks. But, in the administration, we're going to have some real shortfalls. Sorry. Yes.
Hi, my name is Kirsten Silas. I think I had a very similar question, so I just wanted to reaffirm that question and just say, don't forget about us.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I hear you. Thank you.
But I did want to take my time to thank your staff. They're always answering the phone. I was talking to someone and they're like, I don't know whose office I spoke to, but I spoke with someone, and I was like, was it Pocan's office? And they were like, oh yeah. So I just want to thank you. And I wanted to give the compliment directly to you. Your staff is doing a great job. And I'm sure they're on the receiving end of a lot of big feelings because they're the only ones answering the phone. So please thank
Yeah,
them.
no, thank you for that. And Dane's our district director here, so we'll make sure we relay that on our staff call tomorrow. And just so you all know too, I mean, sometimes I understand I'm pissed off a lot lately, but the people who generally are picking up the phone often are interns too, and they're doing this as school credit and stuff. So if they don't have the right answer right away, we're going to try to get it for you, but they may not. So just keep that in mind. And that's true of any office. I know Ron Johnson doesn't generally answer any calls. I think it goes automatically to message. But just know that sometimes that will happen. And just want you to understand when you call, sometimes who's picking up the phone just because of everyone working on casework and other things. So, yes, and I guess you're our final, oh, no. Okay, yes, you're the final question. So thank you.
One more question. First of all, I want to say thank you for coming and speaking to us because I do feel a little bit better.
Good.
And I'm
good.
chronically upset, depressed and angry. But my question has to do with, which I thought was illegal, the donation that Musk made to the campaign.
We need election law reform, as long as you have things like Citizens United as a decision, which we can get rid of a court decision by having statute, right? That's why it's been part of HR 1, the first bill the Democrats introduced when we've been in the majority, but we had problems on the Senate side with their filibuster rules. But it does allow him, it's not like it's going directly to the campaign, but spent in different ways with different dark money groups on behalf of the president and Republicans, but he put in at minimum of $277 million. He's talking about right after Donald Trump had the Tesla car dealership opened up on the White House lawn. He said he's going to give $100 more million to the Trump operation. He spent $10 million in Wisconsin on behalf of a political candidate. This is why, if there's we ask in our podcast, people, what's the one law you would change if you could change one law?
Yes.
And I'll tell you, I come back to this almost all the time because I see the power of special interests. I see that power of that money on a regular basis. And it's becoming even harder and harder. And now in Democratic primaries, I would not be surprised that you will see me have a Democratic primary sometime by someone who's going to be very well funded by a group called AIPAC that is fighting human rights for Palestinians, and a crypto group. They spent $400 million last time. I don't vote that way. I vote on behalf of what I try to do my best always for people in the district. And they tried once. They called someone very prominent this last cycle to get to run against me. And the person, first they asked, can I be beat? And the person said no. And then they said, would you run? And they said no. And then they called me up. But they've gone into other districts and beat people spending $25 million. So I'm just, I'm letting you know, I know I'm on their list because they don't like me, and I'm okay with that. Actually, that makes me feel a little better every morning I wake up. But, the reality is this money issue is really huge. And now that it's coming in primaries where you can spend $4 million and beat someone. I mean, the biggest primary I think we ever had in Wisconsin was maybe $1 million, maybe in the third, they might have just had a little more spent. Think about it. All of a sudden someone drops $4 million or $20 million. That's why we need to have that change. And also, just the amount of lobbyists. There's 15,000 lobbyists in Washington, D.C. There's 435 members of the House and 100 senators, right? So you can do the math pretty quick on the ratio, and that's a bit of a problem, clearly. 10% of those lobbyists are just big pharma. If you wonder why we pay more for prescription drugs than any other country, that's why. So sorry, I'm going longer than your question, but I just I'm channeling my inner Bernie Sanders a little bit right now. I'm telling you about how the system works because it's frustrating, and we need to share that. So Aaron, let me just wrap up if I can then, Aaron. Thank you, first of all, again, for putting this together to Indivisible. Appreciate you all coming out on a Sunday afternoon. Reach out to us still, if you haven't, even if you think I agree with you, it's good to still call or send an email, maybe easier. we keep track of all the numbers and what subjects, but so does every other elected official. So, do that. You can take the same message and send it to Tammy, to Ron Johnson, and to me, right? And it doesn't take any extra effort to add those 2 emails. So do that. It's helpful for us to have an idea what you're looking at and most concerned about, because they've got us more weeks in Washington than usual this year. So when I'm home, I'm doing this, but I'm not home 3 of the 4 weeks during the week. So I'm just not around as often. So that's the best way for me to keep in contact with you all, plus doing stuff like this. And then occasionally going into neighbors' districts and kind of peeing on their leg a little bit. So, I really appreciate you coming out today. And I am, to the person who said they feel a little better, I hope you do. I mean, I strongly believe in our system and I believe in the American people. And while these things are completely new that are happening to us, and it's going to be, we're figuring out the ways to challenge it, Trump appointed judges are overruling him right now in the courts. So that litigation is so important. Red states are going to lose more from things like Medicaid than blue states, right? And that's going to have an impact. And ultimately, our recourse is in the elections, who we send to Congress, and in places like Wisconsin. I heard there's an election on April 1st. So I'm just going to mention that one more time. But we do have that ability to fight back, but support the folks doing litigation, help us get the communication out, follow our social media, and if you can, lift some of those things that we're putting out there so more people see it. We're going to get through this together. It's not going to be easy, but I really appreciate that you give me the honor of being your voice in Washington. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Mark, for being here. I don't know about you all, but I do actually feel a little bit better after that. Speaking of April 1st, we do have a guest that's just going to talk for a few minutes about how easy it can be and what's most important right now with the Crawford campaign. We also have some QR codes that will get you to WISDEMs and you can put your zip code in. There's also some easier ways. So Bruce, please take it away.
Well, thanks, Ann and Indivisible and all you people. I know you all feel like I do. I get up in the morning, I read the news, and I spend the rest of the day pissed off and scared. And it's really great to be in a room with people who feel like I do. There is something we can do about it, though. The antidote to what we're feeling is to take action. And the first action we're all going to take, I know you're all going to take it, is you're going to vote between now and April 1st for Susan Crawford. I know I can tell you to vote. But it's not enough. It doesn't relieve us, does it? So there's something else you can do. Talk to 3 of your friends as you're at the grocery store or out and about. Talk to 3 of your friends about voting and how important it is. Because there are Democrats out there who are not as concerned and not as wired as we are, and they're just not paying attention to this election. It's like 20 or 30% of them. So let's go find them. That's one way, right? We can all do that. That's easy. Second easy thing you can do is to drag out your email list and write yourself an email, make it a mass email. You can apologize if you want, but send an email to everybody you know in the state of Wisconsin and make sure they are going to vote. Ask them to answer you. Easy, right? You can do that. You can pick up and do that in 15 minutes. Here's my biggest antidote to my anxiety, though, and that is to get out and knock on doors and ask for votes. It's a scary thought, I mean, knocking on doors is not something we normally do. We don't knock on strangers' doors very often. But I'm telling you, it's therapeutic. People do want to talk, and it's the most effective thing we can do to make sure we win on April 1st. We do it by, we'll get a list of 50 doors. You'll knock on those doors. You'll have about 8 to 10 conversations. Out of those 8 to 10 conversations, you may change one. You may motivate one person to vote who you wouldn't have. And that's huge because we only need 1 or 2 votes per ward. And a ward is a political construct of, say it's 1,500 voters. There's 6,000 wards in the state of Wisconsin. We add 1 or 2 votes per ward, we win. Okay? So how do you do that? Go to danedems.org. You can remember that, danedems.org, and click on Join My Neighborhood Team. It's going to ask for an email, they'll get back to you. There's opportunities to knock on doors. That's my recommendation. There's opportunities to make phone calls to those big apartment buildings that we can't get into. There's opportunities to write postcards to those same hard to get at locations. You can do this, but we need a lot more people out there doing it. So please remember that danedems.org and go there and sign up. Will you do that for me? Yes? Question? Yeah, I just don't go reach that far. There you go.
Yeah, hi. I've been doing canvassing. The North Side Action Team is the one I belong to. I'm a North Sider. Hey, and I've been a part of it for about 7 years or 8 years. I like to canvass. I think it's helpful that I'm old and short because I'm not threatening at all. And the lists that we work from are lists of Democratic voters who may or may not be intending to vote. So no one's going to tell you, any MAGA garbage. And the conversations I have with people are mostly really positive and really affirming. And it really does give me a sense of that, within every community, there are so many of us who do know what's going on, who do see what's going on, and who might need a little encouragement, but they're on it. So I really want to recommend canvassing for folks who think I could never do that. Maybe it's not so bad.
There you go. Thank you. A testimony from someone who's been there. Thanks a bunch.
Okay, thanks everybody. I'm Jonathan. I'm on the steering committee. So we're going to shift into some breakout. We're going to do 2 different breakouts. The first one will take less time because we probably hopefully get done by 2:30, 2:35. So there's time for the project groups. Okay. I guess someone wants to speak about canvassing real quick. Yeah.
Elon Musk has a massive Starlink, obviously. He doesn't want rural broadband. So this is a problem in rural communities about why
Okay, great. Silas, real quick. Yeah.
Don't know what day the election was. They talked a lot, sometime in March, no, it's April 1st. And so, whoever you're talking with, it's really important that they know the day.
Okay, so, and there could be some people that are trying to confuse people about the election day. So make sure that when you're canvassing and you're talking to your friends, let them know it's April 1st. right? And by the way, Tuesday, early voting starts in Madison. So you can go to the library and some other places for that. Okay, great. So Avisha is going to be passing around the fundraising, but I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But first, so, you know, we are here because we are not cynical people. We believe that we can work together to make a big change, right? Is that right, everybody? Yeah, we're here for that reason. So Indivisible doesn't do things without people power. And so, as promised at the last monthly meeting, we are ready to launch what's called support teams. We already have project groups, which are like the immigration, trans rights, those kind of things. We are starting support teams. Support teams are basically the activities of supporting the other groups and everything that we're doing to function. So today, what I'd like you to, and I know that everybody signed up on our form with, you know, interests, with things that they'd like to do to help. Well, today's the day to just step up and say you're interested. Your level of commitment has to do with the kind of time you have and what you'd like to learn. You know, it's really up to you, how much time and how many groups you're part of. And one is fine, you know, one of each, like a project group and a support group's fine, you know, whatever you feel like you can do. But today's the day to get your name on a list, even though, like today is the commitment, right? That you're going to be part of meetings to get things going. So we're going to describe what the 4 groups are, and I'm going to identify the lead in that group, and we're going to just step out and break into corners, you know, and just say hi, introduce each other, introduce yourselves, and just get on that list, okay? So the first one is the events team. So this is a group that if, you know, immigration group wants to do a rally, they call it the events team is ready to have volunteers ready to do logistical things that group doesn't want to do or, you know, just have the time to do. So Avisha, will you stand up? And here's your placard. And if you would just choose a corner to go into, and then we can get up in a few minutes. And so, again, we're not going to spend a lot of time in these groups, so you can have your time on Zoom or in-person meetings. The second group is communications, and Aaron is the lead for that. You want to get your sign. Communications are writing press releases, working on the website, working on social media, getting the press to things that we're doing, those kind of things. You don't have to know how to do this stuff. There'll be certainly people there that know, and people that are willing to take the lead in organizing things. We have lots of amazing skills in the group. So if you want to even learn about communications and be part of it, you know, we need you. So over here is communications. The third group is recruitment, onboarding, and retention. That's me. So this is the group that is, we haven't really started reaching out for new members yet. We will, but we do have an onboarding committee that welcomes people into the group, helps them get started. Slack is really something that has really been an important place to organize, but I realize it is not really taking the place of our in-person communication, the time that we spend together. So as an onboarding person, I'm leading that group, and I actually am going to start doing a weekly Slack Zoom call, so you can just check in, ask questions, because it's very important, and it's very active among a lot of people that are actually involved, you know, that have already gotten involved with some of the project groups, and of course, as a steering committee. So I want you to feel comfortable with it, get set up. I can help you with that. So I'll send out an announcement. Mondays, I think about 6:30, I will be doing them, but I also do them on a one-to-one basis as needed. Then finally, my phone went, yeah, research, education, and training. This is kind of a really broad group, but if you're interested in doing research, doing some training in our own group, and educating each other, that would be Kirsten. Here's your, give her the board. Yep. And where do you want to go? Okay, great. So those are the groups. So just come on, say hi. We'll get your name on the list. Yeah, Susan. Yes, I will. When we're done with, before we break out in the next set of groups. So we're going to come back together. You can just stand where you are, and I'll just talk for a little bit about the next step before we're done for the day. Yeah, okay, great. So let's just take 10 minutes or so just to get into our separate groups. Say hi, get your name. Oh, yeah. I will. Oh, the April 5th, why don't you come up and talk to me about that a little bit? You want to talk about it for a moment? Yeah, okay. Like they're gonna walk out? What do you want to do? Oh, okay, right, that's a good point, okay. So, do you want to just say something about April 5th? Just a few announcements and then we'll break out. Okay,
I think, we're just thinking maybe we'll lose a couple people in these breakouts. So let's make a couple of announcements. One is that there is a nationwide April 5th protest rally that's being organized by 11 groups, including 50-5101, Indivisible, SEIU, 11, I think it's 11 partners nationwide. So it's really going to be a big one to send a message. It's called the Hands Off Rally. Hands off our money, hands off our rights, hands off our data. It's Indivisible does have information about it, some calls. We'll keep you posted. We're hoping to connect with other groups in Wisconsin, Indivisible groups. Do you want to talk about it Friday?
yes, yeah, so we haven't really gotten involved with the meetings yet, so it should we'll be getting the social media out soon about it and emails. Okay, so we are having our empty chair town hall on Friday, March 21st at the First Congregational Church, which is on the near west side on campus by the engineering building, from 7 p.m. to 8:30. We're going to have this beautiful chair that unfortunately won't get used by anybody important. And but we will have an opportunity for people to stand up at a microphone and talk to Ron Johnson, and we have a professional videographer that will be there to record it. So if you want to be on camera, great. If you don't, will there be opportunity for you to speak, not be on camera? But, sorry? Yeah, March 21st, that's this Friday, 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., First Congregational Church. We've already posted on social media, on Facebook page. We'll be getting information out about it. What? On Mobilize as well, yes. Okay, finally, just a few things. We did advertise that we were going to meet at Cafe Coda after for socializing. It's a really nice time to just sit and talk and get to know each other. Cafe Coda will not be available for us today, so we're going to meet at the Harmony Bar at about 3:30 or so, by the time, people will start showing up soon after that, actually. Yeah, but we know that, yeah. Yeah. All right, and then finally, it is important that we have some fundraising. We do have expenses such as room fees, snack supplies, signs, canvassing, costs, cards, stamps, printing costs. So we would really appreciate it if you were to go on our Act Blue. We have, I think back at this table, there's a QR code. If you could donate $5 a month, $10 a month if you feel like it, or anything that you can donate, even one time, once in a while donating. We really appreciate it because we need to be able to cover these expenses, okay? All right, so now we're ready to get up and meet folks in the corner.
I just had an idea that the Crawford election, we have like 2 weeks left. Like what would happen? And that has an extreme time limit and a short time frame. What would happen if we just all mobilized for the next 2 weeks on that? And then we went on and separated. What? Oh, you're already doing it. Okay,
Right.
Great.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, actually, Ellen, we are really it's going to take time for these groups to start really forming and meeting. We were really planning for this to kick off after the election because people really want to spend their time on it, and that should be the way it is. Okay, let's break out for about 10 minutes or so in our groups. So research over here, onboarding. Yeah.
So the first thing.
I'm just going to make sure I get everybody's name. Yeah, Kevin. About onboarding, right?
Yep. First thing is, I'm not a member and I want to become a member.
Okay.
And